All right, me. It is the end of 2025. It is now 2026. It's the first day of 2026. And this is the, I guess, last year in review. Rough year, both in terms of books and in terms of life, which, is always going to happen, right? I am still at my 50 books a year average, but that is certainly boosted by a couple of facts of 2 years ago now having read an excess amount of books, and then this last year reading a lot of books at the end and a lot of plays at the end that are incredibly short and very easy to read through. So yeah, it's definitely an inflated number, and I'm willing to admit that. But they are all, separate works and whatnot, so it is what it is. Moved twice in the year. Working jobs that made it very difficult to read. And so a lot of my reading was done in separate spaces and separate times, which is, of course, difficult in a lot of ways, because even though I very much enjoy reading, it is something that it takes effort. Reading takes effort, which is, certainly one of the reasons as to why reading has been dying and is slowly getting away from us, right? Because it's not just, right, reading for entertainment and reading for understanding and comprehension to then discuss what's going on in the book. That is more than just the pure plot, right? I also read a lot of books this year in pieces this year that I did not like. And I was talking with a very good friend of mine, and she teaches English up in Michigan, and we were talking about this project, and she knows that I've been doing this project and whatnot. And it kind of came down to, why do you read books that you don't like, that you don't enjoy? And initially when I started this project and started doing this, I knew that I was going to read things that I didn't necessarily enjoy. And the reason I was doing it was because it's the completionist idea, right? That you should, that I own these and therefore I should understand what they are, right? And then that kind of morphed into this idea that, and it's still one that I very much believe in, which is that just because you don't enjoy something or because you don't agree with it doesn't mean that you should still be able to understand what it is and be able to engage with it to a certain amount, because if you don't enjoy it or don't agree with things, part of it is then you have to be able to then talk about it or explain why, right? And I think that is both for literature as well as for a lot of aspects of life, is that, and I am saying this from a very privileged stance of view, right? But that when you disagree with things, you have to be able to understand and talk about why you disagree with them or why you don't like those ideas or concepts. So yeah. And then the most recent answer I kind of gave to my friend kind of came down to this point of, in a world where AI generated works of literature and works of art are becoming more and more commonplace because it is so easy. And so much of what we do and what people have been creatively writing is now being adopted or being fed into these machines that, although can speak the language, are not necessarily have the same forethought or concepts of what they actually mean. And so, these are published things, right? And even though I don't like them, or that I don't agree with them, that they're just bad pieces of literature, someone cared enough to write it, and then someone cared enough to publish it, and then because I buy very few of my books new, someone else cared enough to buy it before me, and then try to give that book a second life, right? And so that's kind of where I stand on things, is that, there are pieces that I struggle reading constantly. I've been reading one book for a month now, and it's because I keep stopping to then go read other books, because it's just not, even though I enjoy reading it, it's a very dense book. It's a very difficult book. And so I am constantly taking time away from it. I stopped reading the series of all of the Wizard of Oz pieces at the end here. Eventually I'll pick them back up. I'll probably pick them back up here relatively soon. Just so I can get, shelf that book finally. But, it's, even though these are things I'm not necessarily enjoying reading, someone cared enough to partake in it in some way before me, and therefore that's worth something. This came up, and in this kind of line, I think it came up because we were talking about how my friend had initially started doing kind of like a friend newsletter type deal, which was kind of asking questions and, hey, what are updates on everyone's lives and things like that, which was very fun and very fantastic. And she did it for probably 4 or 5 months and then stopped. And part of it was because she really began a lot of teaching and having to really do a lot of that stuff. And then part of it was her kind of deal of where it was as her explanation was, it takes me 8 to 14 hours to put one of these newsletters together, right? And make it look nice and format everything the way I wanted to. So that's a day, 2 days of work. Or I can just feed all of this information that you guys send me to an AI generator, and it can do most of the work within 10 seconds. And so is that a form of writing that I really want to focus on and do and be a part of? Because there is no, it's so inefficient and is so clearly being taken over by other things. And so we talked about it for a good while. That's kind of where that my mindset kind of came from. But I don't know, I feel like it's a good one. I think it's been buried in there, and at least that mindset has been buried in there, and I think it just needed the right conversation to kind of pull out those specific words. Yeah. Looking at the books that I currently own and currently have on hand, I think I have 2 to 3 years of books left. Certainly I spoiled myself by reading a great deal of these plays and short things at the end here. But I'm almost done with that one book. I have 7, I think, more Wizard of Oz. I have a number of short books I'm going to be reading here very quickly, a number of series, actually just one kind of big series. But yeah, I think this is going to be another kind of slower year of reading. I anticipate probably having to move again at some point this year. You know, life is life, and you know, how we choose to interact with the world is really important, right? And it would be very easy to hold myself in and only do what is easy and only do things that don't really have to think about. And that's what I've been doing for the last couple days, effectively. And it's so easy to do. But, you know, to care enough about what someone else has written and what someone else has chosen to attempt to immortalize in some way, whether it be about themselves, other people, themes, topics, descriptions, right? It's important that those words, at least someone looks at them. So yeah, that's this last year in review. We'll see what this year brings.